Last week, I took a look at the NVIDIA GeForce GTX 970, which performed surprisingly well in the games I tested it with. Ultimately, I concluded that the GTX 970 is still a graphics card worth considering if you can get one for $40 to $50 like I did. It can still handle 1080p gaming with some newer titles at decent frame rates and may offer a good entry into PC gaming for someone who wants to wait to spend a ton of money on parts. Today, I have the GTX 960, the mid-range entry into the 900 series, which was built upon the Maxwell architecture and the 28nm process. The 960 was released in 2015 as a step below the 970 in the lineup. The stock specs include 1024 shading units, 64 texture mapping units, and 32 render output units. It also has 2 or 4 GB of GDDR5 VRAM running on a 128-bit memory bus. The base clock of 1127 MHz could boost up to 1178 MHz, and due to its native DirectX 12 support, this card can technically start up any modern game. You can pick up a used 960 for about $40 to $50 in 2023 and get an even better deal on the local market. I got my card for $20 via Facebook Marketplace. It is a 2GB G1 3-fan design with a metal backplate and includes 1 HDMI, 2 DVI, and 3 DisplayPort video outs. My particular model is factory overclocked by about 10%. For testing, I'm going to be running this card with my i3 10105F test bench with 16GB of DDR4 RAM at a memory speed of 2666 MHz and Windows 10 running on an NVMe SSD. The in-game graphic settings will be selected based on what I felt was playable for me, and the resolution may be dropped to 720p in a few titles when needed. Starting off, Unigine Heaven 1080p low went well with 146 FPS average and 1% lows in the upper 30s. The 960 also did well in superposition with an average FPS of around 66 and a solid percentile low at 1080p low. I like using these benchmarks at 1080p low to compare the cards I've already tested. In Unigine Heaven, the GTX 960 did not perform as well as the RX 580 or the GTX 970, which are higher end cards, but based on my price paid, it offered the most value in cost per frame with 14 cents per frame. Results were the same with superposition, as it was the third best performer and had the lowest cost per frame with 30 cents. While playing the first driving mission in GTA 5 with all the settings at high at 1080p, I saw an average frame rate of around 130 FPS and 1% lows of around 100 FPS. It was a good enough experience for me to effectively deliver the card to Simeon in pristine condition. In a CSGO bot match on Dust 2 with settings cranked up all the way at 1080p, the 960 managed frame rates around 130 FPS with 1% lows in the 50s and 60s. In Rocket League, I got an average of 150 FPS and a 1% low of 38, which offered a smooth experience at 1080 maximum settings. Fortnite at 1080p with FXAA was also a great experience with a 93 FPS average and 30 FPS 1% low. Visuals were good by my standards, and stutters were few and far between, leading to great gameplay. Next, I tested Assassin's Creed Unity at 1080 high settings and achieved a playable 41 FPS and a 27 FPS 1% low, which allowed for smooth gameplay while preserving the great looking visuals that this game offered even after 9 years after release. I finished off testing with the more intensive games, which I chose to test at 720p. Horizon Zero Dawn at 720 high looked okay and got an average just shy of 60 FPS, which would at least offer a playable experience if you're okay with the lower resolution. Cyberpunk 2077 at 720 high was fairly worse with averages around 30 FPS and a 17 FPS 1% low. In order for a decent experience in Cyberpunk, settings would probably have to be lowered just a tad more. After finishing my testing, I can safely say that the GTX 960 still offers some value in 2023 for the right person. For a low price, the 960 may be a great buy if you know its limitations. Like most budget hardware, easier to run games will work fine with this card, but if you want to play games that are harder to run and don't want to spend money on a newer card, I would recommend something like the GTX 970 for $60 or the $70 RX 580 before the GTX 960 in 2023 based on my own testing so far. I have a ton more GPUs that I plan to test in the future, including the GT 1030, RX 470, GTX 760, and more. If you have any recommendations, please leave them in the comments. Also, if you like these videos reviewing older budget PC hardware, consider subscribing to the channel. Thank you.